Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of Wellness in the Workplace. My name is Mbali Mziane, and I am your host. Wellness in the Workplace is a podcast that aims to equip new and experienced professionals with the tools and insights to navigate challenging workplace dynamics. And in today's episode, we are talking about the transition from your corporate 9 to 5 into full-time entrepreneurship. And I have with me on this episode in a slightly different format, Siyamtanda Mdingi, who is the founder and CEO of Vive Consulting, which is a value strategy and innovation consulting agency. And we'll be talking about how she transitioned from the corporate world into, the world of entrepreneurship. She's been doing this for the last 2 years, started her company Peak Pandemic in 2020, and we'll just be talking about her journey from the corporate space until this point. Welcome to Wellness in the Workplace, yeah?
Thank you so much, Mbali. I'm so happy to be here and very excited to speak about my journey with you and your listeners.
Yes, finally, this is happening. I mean, we've been planning for this for quite some time, but obviously had to figure out the technical requirements that would make this possible. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your time today.
Not a problem.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so let's get straight into it, right? Before getting into the meat of our topic, I'd like for you to just give an overview and some background to our audience about who Siyamtanda Mdingi is, how you were raised. Tell us more about your childhood and how that has informed the person that you are today.
Ooh, those three questions are super fun. And I'm going to try to not take up 5 years of your time, because if I'm speaking about myself, I might take the next 10 years of everybody's time. But in short, Siyam Mdingi is short for Siyamtanda Mdingi. There is a small typo in my name on my birth certificate, no less, because whoever was writing my name at the time said, you know what would be really hot for this girl? To not have an H in her name. Spectacular. And ever since then, I've just not fitted the mold like that. Like, it's almost as if my name was a precursor to the kind of life that I would end up living. In terms of how I was raised, I'm the firstborn of three kids. Firstborn of, so it was me, my little sister, and my little brother. I was raised by my mother and my father. Really uneventful childhood in terms of, the usual backstories. I wouldn't say I was a very introverted child. I had extroverted tendencies. It's just that you would expect kids to be extremely gregarious. And to a small extent, I kind of was. But the older I got, the more kind of sort of like quieted down a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. I was always really bookish at school. I was known as the bombastic one who knew all the big words. Real fun.
You still do
until
know a lot of big words.
Drag me, expose me, queen. Until I hit about varsity, which was essentially where I got the opportunity to really bloom properly. I'd always had a sort of verbose way, and I was always very, talkish. But when I got to varsity and I moved to Johannesburg for varsity, it was like a whole new world. I'd left all of everyone that I'd ever gone to school with. Only 1 or 2 people had come up to Johannesburg or even came up to the same university as me. And it was like a clean slate. So that's where the very outgoing, very friendly, very talkative Sia came into play. And I did an undergraduate in science, ironically. BSc in biochemistry and genetics.
Say it in full. Please say it in full so that they know.
A BSc in biochemistry and cell biology and genetics and developmental biology, if we are being specific. So during my time, I did a science degree. I did some student leadership things here and there, not all the way up to SRC. Good Lord, I never had that kind of moxie at that time, but I did do some council leadership, which had the opportunity of, that was sort of my first taste of being in service, counting, of course, my time in high school as well. where I was a prefect. I did do first aid, I did do volunteer sort of work, but varsity was the first sort of place where it wasn't just a couple of people in your school. It was now a couple of hundred students within the department that you are now going to school in. So that was really fun. And my first look into being of service, which was like, okay, cool. You know what? I like helping people. I like doing work that helps other people do their job or do their work better. So then I graduated from my beautiful science degree, and then to be able to make it forward in the science department or the science field, you actually need to go undergrad, honors, master's, PhD to be able to get anywhere. But unfortunately, there's a huge stopgap at the honors level where most schools or most universities only really have about 30 slots of spaces for all of their honors classes in the sciences anyway. So that was one place where it was like, you can't get in honors. And I was like, well, I don't really feel like stopping or trying to wait or to do other things to kind of sort of force my way into honors, which was definitely an option that I could have had at the time, but it wasn't something that I was interested in at the time, to my mother's consternation, because she said, excuse me, you spent so much time saying that you wanted to be a scientist, and now you don't want to be a scientist anymore. So I said, well, okay, that's fine. Let me go and do an internship. And that's essentially how my career began. But that's, a story for a later time. But overall, to answer the question of how does this contribute to who I am today, all of those experiences in ways large and small kind of taught me, like, opened my mind in certain ways. So one of my favorite stories to say about myself is that when I was in grade 11 going into grade 12 was actually the moment where I started to see that, dang, actually, I can do stuff and I can actually, it's that moment where I realized, like, whoa, I could do this. I could do the thing. So what happened was, at our school, to become a prefect, you had to essentially volunteer yourself and say, listen, I would like to be a prefect, and you signed a document saying same. You couldn't be nominated to be a prefect if you hadn't said yourself that you would like to be nominated. So it wasn't a situation where somebody could just be plucked up and say, you're a prefect, without them consenting to it, which was pretty progressive of the school to do that, of going, hey, you need to nominate yourself and you need to consent to being selected as a prefect. So in that moment, in grade 11, I really did want to be a prefect. But there was always that voice in the back of my mind saying, nobody's going to vote for you. Nobody is going to put you into being in a position of leadership. And I said, well, it doesn't matter. I still would like to be considered. And I like that story, or I like that moment, because that was the very first moment where I said, okay, cool. If I put myself out there, then there's a likelihood that something will happen. And every single point of where I had decided that I wanted to put myself out there, there were positive sort of outcomes. My starting VIV, my deciding to go into business as opposed to science. All of those moments kind of stemmed from that one moment where I decided, hey, let me just bet on myself for that moment. And wouldn't you know it, I was nominated to become a prefect, and then I received enough votes to become a prefect, which was pretty huge for me at the time, because I was, very bookish. I didn't think that I was popular enough to get votes, or well-liked enough or recognized enough to get votes. And yet it happened. And that was sort of a theme that kept repeating itself. It repeated itself again when I was in matric. And they were selecting who was going to be prefect of the year, who would receive an award recognizing them for their work as a prefect. Once again, I said, well, I don't know if my fellow prefects think that I've worked hard enough, but I think I did. And so I voted for myself. As it turned out, there was one vote between me and the second person who had been nominated as prefect of the year. And I like to think that that one vote was my vote saying, you know what, damn it, I got this, I can do this. So all of those experiences when I was, younger and when I was in varsity, they were all a patchwork of moments where I had said, where I thought one thing, which is, I'm not able to do this, or I don't think I can fit in here, or I don't think I can carry this off. And I said, well, I'm going to try and do it anyway. I'm going to try and put myself out there anyway. And then I got positive sort of returns, which sounds a little cliched, I know, but this is my story.
This is your story, and it's true. And it's true. And I mean, it's pretty much the same theme that led to the birth of Vive, right? It was a moment where you decided to take a bet on yourself, to put yourself out there and do something that you had never done before. But before getting into how you started Vive and what the inspiration and motivation behind that was, I'd like to know how you pivoted into the world of business, starting with the internship and then moving from one role to the next.
Cool. So the internship itself wasn't the point at which I decided that I wanted to go into business. At that time, I just wanted a job. I really wanted a job because it was drilled quite deeply into me that you go to school, you go to varsity and you get a job, and then you work and work and work, and you work your way up if you want to, and then you die. So the the whole
sounds
point,
very morbid.
Right? It is if you think about it, but that's especially for us Black people. It's very much heavily driven into us that you need to be able to support yourself. And one of the best ways to do that is to go to university to get that degree and to work in that the sphere that you got your degree in. Very few of our parents, particularly us people who are born in the 90s, going, well, the 80s, let's say. So people who are born in the 80s and younger, their parents definitely told them, listen, if you're going to go get a degree in science, you're going to work in science and you're going to work in science for the rest of your life. If you get a degree in in business, that's where you're going to work for the rest of your life. The whole thing of moving around is something that's a very new concept to our generation. Those who are younger than us, their parents are a little bit more open-minded, but I, as a 90s kid, definitely got that. So my starting an internship was actually that whole thing of like, okay, cool. Now that I have a degree in science, and at that point I was still like, you know what, the job that I get still needs to be at least science related or science aligned. Almost to give credence to the fact that I have a science degree, must work in science. My internship was at a contract research organization that did clinical trials. And at that time, I was like, okay, cool. Then, well, let's get into clinical trials because I have a degree in science and clinical trials are aligned with pharmaceutics, which can overlap with the biochemistry that I did. Very fascinating. I worked there for a year, and unfortunately, sometimes internships can get renewed into either sort of a part-time, no, not a part-time, or a contract sort of thing where they go, okay, cool, now that you finished your internship, here's another contract, or here's a permanent placement. Unfortunately, that did not happen with me. So after that internship, I moved into my next job, which was customer service position at a food testing laboratory. That was also another job where it was like, okay, cool. Food testing can be aligned with science because food sciences, these two things work hand in hand. And food testing can also be very heavily reliant on biochemistry. I said, perfect. This is another job where it's like, okay, cool. I have a science degree, work in science. And during my time in customer services, I had a manager, Kesh Patel, who is one of my mentors, and shout out to him because when I worked under him, he recognized that, okay, listen, you've actually got a very strong tendency for sales. You have a very good personality. You're able to problem solve. You're able to find out the best sort of solutions for your clients. How about once you've worked for a bit in customer services, we help you move into technical sales. And so after a year of customer service work or working in customer services, I was able to pick up how to work within that company, what the sort of clients are looking like, what the sort of services that we offer are, got familiar. And then thereafter, I was moved into technical sales, which was fantastic. I had a wonderful time. And at that time, I think it was about 8 or 9 months into it, I said, okay, you know what? I think what would be a good idea if I got a postgraduate diploma in business, you know, to sort of strengthen the sales acumen by bolstering it with some business knowledge. It was fantastic. Had a great time. Did a PDBA at Wits. By the way, viewers,
That
Mbali
is
and I
how we
met
met.
like this. Yes, that is true.
We met at Wits. Yes, yes, yes.
That's correct. And at that time, I was actually very interested in working my way up within the corporate sphere. So doing that
Yeah.
whole thing of working and then becoming a manager, becoming management, upper management.
Climbing
And
the corporate
I
ladder. Yeah,
exactly, I'd set my
yeah,
sights on sitting at MD or CEO level. I was
yeah,
very
yeah,
ambitious.
yeah.
But the more I worked in the corporate space within that company, I realized that actually moving up that way kind of chafed a little bit because
Mm,
A would take a whole lot of time, and you had to
yes.
take into consideration the environment that you were working with or the company
Yeah,
that you are working in to see if there's actually even the opportunity to maneuver like that.
yeah.
And after some time, it became apparent within the company that I was working in that actually the culture isn't the best. It's not the
Mm,
greatest.
mm,
And then I ended up moving out of that company. But at the same time, my mind had been open at that point. It was
yeah,
2019, I think it was.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
20, I think it
2019.
was
Yeah,
2019.
yeah.
Yes. So after that, I was like, okay, cool. That was when my mind was open up to the concept of entrepreneurship. And I'll never forget because it was this exact thought that I had had that properly blew my mind right wide open to entrepreneurship. I said, okay, cool. I'm wanting to become an MD and I'm wanting to become a CEO. If I start
Mm,
my own business, I'm instantly an MD and I am
yeah,
instantly a
yeah,
CEO.
yeah.
So I said, okay, well, if I'm chasing a title, then I can start a business and instantly a CEO. But that wasn't the only source of, that wasn't the only reason I wanted to pivot into entrepreneurship. It was
Mm,
definitely wanting to have sort of autonomy over my own time, my own life, and my own efforts to be able
mm,
to direct my efforts towards something that meant something to me. So, for
yeah,
example, if you're a person who's working your way up in the corporate ladder, you're almost a little bit limited in terms of the type of work that you can do. Whoever's above you at the time is telling you how you are going to be directing your efforts. They're going to be telling you who you're going to be working with. They're going to be telling you how you are going to effect the sort of change that you are wanting to effect. So if
yeah,
you are, for
yeah.
example, a person who is wanting to change the way that people look at work, if you are climbing within a corporate environment, you'll only be able to do it within the confines and the
Context.
context of
Yes,
that
yes,
company
yes,
that you are
yes.
working at. So
Yep,
if you're
yep.
working at Discovery, you can only do that work in the Discovery way. If you're
Yeah,
working at
yeah.
LinkedIn, you can only do that work in the LinkedIn way. And that was something that was a little bit like, oh, not for me, thanks. I'd like to be able to do it in the way that I'd like.
That you want to.
So
Yeah.
exactly. And then after
Mm,
that, I actually left the food testing environment and I went into a small company. And all these experiences were all the roles that I had taken up in all of these companies were all technical sales and all sales and client relationship management roles.
mm,
So after the food testing company, I moved into a smaller company that was doing mining and allied fields. So they were supplying companies and they were supplying would it be companies and organizations that were involved in the mining and allied fields.
okay.
So
Okay.
I can't really tell you all of the clients that they did, but they
Yeah.
were a relatively
Yeah.
smaller company. They weren't a corporate environment. So
Mm,
in that company, I got to experience what it's like to work in a smaller team, in a smaller
mm,
company, one that
mm.
had been founded by someone else. So I got to work
Ah,
in an entrepreneur's
yes.
business.
Okay.
And
Okay.
in maneuvering that, I got to see how smaller businesses work. I got to see what their business concerns were. I got to see and understand almost what it was like working for someone who decided to leave corporate and start their own business. I got to see it
Mm,
from the
mm,
employee's perspective, but at the same time, having the same sort of look of like, okay, cool. If I were to start my own business, this is what it would look like. That was
mm,
2019, 2020.
mm.
2020 is when COVID struck, or rather 2020 January was when I founded Vive.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. At the very least, I should be able to do this, part-time after work. And then
Mm,
COVID struck. And I was retrenched from that job as a result of
mm,
COVID. And I stayed for 6 months at home, or rather in Johannesburg still. I didn't move back to East London, which is my home. And in that 6 months, I was still trying to get a job, which, sounds a little counterintuitive. It was like, well, why didn't you go and do V full time at that point? At that point, I had literally just founded Vive. And so I was in no position, no place to be able to go Vive full time. And quite frankly, at the time, Vive did not look like what it is now.
Right now.
Service offerings changed. All of that good stuff changed. So then at that point, I was like, okay, cool. We can't yet move into full-time entrepreneurship just yet. I need to look for a job. And so I spent the next 6 months being supported by my mom and my dad. My word, those two are my heroes, because during that time they were able
shout out to
help.
them.
Biggest shout outs. My goodness, they saved my life. And my uncles and my aunts and, friends and family as well. But my parents were the two biggest support pillars holding me up during that time. So I was able to find a new job in August of 2020, and I worked at a VAT. So it was a larger company. They did VAT returns for global companies. And now I'm in the taxation field all of a sudden, the furthest point away from science. And it was at that point where I was like, okay, girl, we have tried to make fetch happen with the science degree, and we're fine if we don't return to the science field. And that was the point where I was like, okay, cool. You know what? I don't regret doing a science degree. It was really fun. I was very interested in it at the time, but now it's like, okay, cool. We've almost transitioned out of, science related jobs. We are now in finance related jobs. So I did that for a year, for about a year. And then in about September of last year, what it essentially started happening is that company realized that actually Sia's got a business of her own. And they gave me the opportunity. They framed it as an opportunity for me to go full-time with Vive. And they were like, well, here you go. You can leave and go do Vive full-time, which was when I was like, okay, girls, thank you so much for the opportunity for me to go do V full-time. We all know what that means.
Know what that means. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were very diplomatic about it, which to their credit, they were quite diplomatic about it, but we all understood what all of that meant. And so in September of 2021, I went and I began doing V full-time. Very nerve-wracking, because now I don't have the comfort, the stability, the fallback of having a full-time 9 to 5. And at the same time, it was almost freeing, because for a long time I had been saying, okay, at some point I'm going to leave corporate and I'm going to go do V full-time. And I had been putting that forward to 2023, 2025.
Yeah.
And fate was like, surprise, girl, 2021.
We're doing it today.
We're doing it now.
Yeah.
So I stayed in Johannesburg for a couple of months, and then I realized actually it would actually be a lot better if I were to move back to East London home and try and do Vive from there. And once again, my parents, those people are my heroes, because they said, come home, it's fine, we'll support you. And I've been here this side ever since, and I've just been having the best time.
Yeah. Interesting journey. I mean, I'm tempted to ask you about some of the challenges that you had during your time in corporate. You alluded to, a very almost toxic work culture at some point. And I'm just interested to find out a little bit more about that, and how that just, resulted in some of the changes that you decided to make within your career at the time.
Cool. So at one of the places that I'd worked at, for the sake of everyone involved, we will not mention which one it is.
Of course.
I had noted that one of the places that I'd worked at had a culture where upper management did not listen to anybody that was below them unless they were saying stuff that they wanted to hear. So there was a lot of almost fracturation that would be happening between the departments.
Yeah.
And at the place that I had worked at, the departments had to work together. Otherwise, the offering was not being given to the client
Delivered. Yeah.
effectively. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I noted that the departments almost worked in silos and they begrudgingly worked together. So to give a very general example, if, for instance, the accounts department and the technical sales department didn't see eye to eye, it would affect the client because, for example, the client would say, but I sent my PO in, why is the work not getting done? Technical sales would go to accounts would say something, but they'd say to the client, they would want technical sales to take it to the client. And it's like, but now we're wasting a bit of time by going through us instead of going straight to the client. So in that example, I learned how organizations can have almost these silos where they cut themselves off at the ankle as a result of not allowing the departments to interact with each other freely. Where now we're closing rank with each other. Like, okay, cool. The salespeople need to band together against the accounts people who need to band together against the delivery people who need to. So in that instance, I realized how important it is, first and foremost, for almost there to be camaraderie, to be encouraged between all of the departments, for each of the departments to see the people who work in the other team as not only the sales team, but also Sia from the sales team. Sia needs to see Annette from accounts as Annette from accounts and not just accounts person Annette, because all of those frustrations would be like, okay, cool. Well, Annette, accounts face person, is not doing the work X, Y, and Z. Instead of going to Annette and going, Annette, you know, this client is really having a hard time. Is there something that we can do to help her? Or what is it that I can do on my end and speak to the client about? Maybe there are some missing invoices that hadn't gotten to the client. Is there something that you want me to speak to the client about? So that at least, you know, we are facilitating some of that partnership and that working together. I definitely,
this is some of the work that you do with Vive, right? Going into organizations, identifying, you know, those gaps within the structure of their teams, within the structure of their workflows, in order to extract that value, right? And I almost just want to go into talking a lot more about Vive and what you do and the type of work that you do, because based on your story, I realized that you didn't really prepare for your transition into entrepreneurship. You were almost thrust into it out of your, you know, lack of will at the time. So how did you get to a point of just packaging, you know, what Vive does in the way that it is today, and just being able to also see value in the services that you offer before showing other organizations how they can extract value from their services?
Awesome. So in the very beginning, first of all, Vive was founded as Vive Brand Consulting.
Yes, I remember that very well.
Indeed, yes. So we did more like brand management because at my time as a salesperson, I realized that a lot of companies didn't really know how to communicate their unique value properly. So the concept of value was a linchpin concept, or like a key concept within Vive's offering. A lot of organizations struggle to communicate their unique value propositions. They struggle to leverage off their unique value propositions. And in the beginning, it was sort of, okay, so then we're going to help organizations identify their unique value propositions and be able to talk about it in terms of branding themselves. And then I realized that now, wait a minute, it's a little bit more than that. Or most people who are either in corporate and work in sort of the strategy aspect, or people who are entrepreneurs who, you know, run their own business. Strategy is sort of the foundation of any organization. If you don't have a strong enough strategy, then everything else falls apart from that point on forwards. So if an organization is struggling with their branding, then they're struggling with having a strategy about their branding. And
Yeah.
most of the time, I noted that organizations didn't really have the strongest idea of what their own strategies were as it related not only to branding, but entire operations as it is. So that's how we've then evolved from being a branding consultancy to being a strategy consultancy, because now it was more like, okay, the reason you're struggling with your value proposition is because you understand it as the organization, you understand your value proposition, but you're not able to communicate it clearly. Number two, you're not able to leverage off of your value proposition to, drive your organization's operations, to drive your organization's activities. So you are looking at value the wrong way around. You're going, okay, cool. Our organization does things and that drives growth or that drives profit, and that is value. Whereas what you should be doing is saying, okay, what is our unique value as our organization?
Yeah.
What sort of value are we providing to our prospective clients? What sort of value for nonprofit organizations would be, what is the value that we provide to our donors? What is the value that we provide to our beneficiaries? And then saying, okay, off of that, providing that value to our organization is what then drives growth, giving that to our clients. So if you identify and you know your unique value and you're able to give that to your clients, that's what's going to drive revenue. That's what's going to drive growth. So that Vive essentially helps organizations identify their unique value propositions and then create strategies to identify it, to capture it, to leverage on it, and to protect it. So the whole concept of value strategy is a term that I came up with to sort of encapsulate that whole concept of identifying your value and leveraging off of it and changing your operations. So now you are no longer just doing stuff to drive profit. Now you are doing stuff because you're trying to capture that unique value and work off of that going forwards. So that's
I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious then to find out how you monetize all of this. I mean, conceptually, it makes sense. It seems like something that a lot of businesses would require. But, for someone who might have a similar idea, but still in maybe the corporate space or in the process of transitioning and are looking to how they could monetize their ideas, what have you applied in your business that you've managed to monetize, and what frameworks have you actually just referred to help you just sustain yourself, to grow the business and to monetize the work that you do?
So in the beginning, it was actually a little bit of a rough story, or rather it was the story of every other organization, really. I started out by giving out pro bono work. And what I would do is I'd start off small. Organizations at the very beginning, they don't know their value proposition, or they understand it and they don't really know how to communicate it. So I focused very heavily on that. The concept of value strategy comes in only after the organization has gotten familiar with their value propositions. They've gotten familiar with communicating it, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'd been doing, or what I have been doing, is that I began with pro bono work, and I did a lot of pro bono work to be able to, package it properly for my own knowledge. It's almost like a market test at that point of saying, okay, cool. Yeah. What did my pro bono clients respond to the best? What didn't they like a lot? Did they understand the concept? Did I explain it to them clearly enough? And then from that point onwards, I started taking on paying clients, going, okay, cool. For the time being, let's start off just by clarifying your value proposition, putting it together, writing it out, identifying how we can pull that value proposition through into your operations. What does that look like? And then from there, if the business themselves or the organization themselves said, you know what, this is amazing work, what can I do to do it more, or to do more with it? That's where I'd be like, okay, cool. One of our other offerings is to build in now your value strategy. And one of the frameworks that I designed for this work it's on my website. And it's a little bit embarrassing that I'm nervous at this point that I've completely forgotten about it. is it's basically the value approach. It was like, okay, cool. What we do is we comb through your business model canvas, and we say, okay, cool. Where in this business model canvas can we identify value? How can we pull it out? How can we make it, more prominent? And then we start working. Okay, cool. Now we can start pulling the value proposition through all of those parts of the business model canvas, which has been really fun. Certain organizations really loved it. Other organizations were like, okay, cool, this is a little bit beyond our scope right now. Yikes, you're coming through with something really, really new, and we don't know how to do this. And so it was like, okay, cool, we'll just dial it back a little bit. But it has been very much trial and error-y, because this new offering technically only kicked in around the same time that I had left corporate, which was September last year. There's nothing like, sudden change to get you really inspired. So it hasn't been a whole long time of me doing this, but I have been iterating on it. So it's been really fun.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. So what are you learning about yourself and your journey in entrepreneurship?
So basically, it's the whole transitioning from full-time employment to, full-time entrepreneurship. I had to get really comfortable with the concept of uncertainty. The whole concept of you have a stable job and you have a stable income at the end of every month in full-time entrepreneurship is less so in entrepreneurship, because not every month is like 10,000 rands, 10,000 rands, or 20,000 rands, 20,000 rands. There are certain months where it's like, oh, this is a zero progress month completely. Like there's almost, I had to get familiar with the concept of being uncomfortable very, very quickly. I had to become comfortable with the notion that, like, okay, this month it's very slow, and there's nothing that I can do about it being a slow month this month. The whole thing of there's nothing you can do about this thing that you are currently in was definitely one of the more pricklier parts of entrepreneurship, because everyone has this concept of like, okay, if you're an entrepreneur, then you have to be really agile and you have to be able to fix all the everything. And that is definitely true. You have to be very agile. You do have to be able to fix all the everything. But there are certain instances where you truly can't fix that thing that is going on. And you have to become
your control.
Exactly. And more stuff is out of your control as an entrepreneur than it is when you are a full-time employee. When you're a full-time employee, if this thing is out of your control, you take it to your manager. If it's out of your control as an entrepreneur, you are the manager.
The manager.
So you have to get, or I had to learn to get very comfortable with the concept of, okay, cool, you know what? Now I'm in a position where I'm a little bit tight, or I'm a little bit stuck, and I just have to breathe my way through it. If there is a way for me to get through it, I will find it. But if I'm not able to find a way to navigate through this, it's just one of those moments where you just have to sit still and move through it. So that was definitely a moment for me that I will never forget. In my career.
Comfortable. Getting comfortable with discomfort. I think
Very
a lot
much.
of us can actually learn from that, really. So in the process of learning about yourself and learning about entrepreneurship, what are some lessons that you learned from the corporate environments that you're actually applying now in your business?
That is a wonderful question. So we like to almost like in caps and in bold. We like to almost demonize the corporate environment for being very strict and very rigid. It's very true that the corporate environment can be very rigid. It doesn't allow for a lot of wiggle room, but that strictness and that rigidity comes from structure.
And process.
And process. And process. Once a thing is a thing, it's a thing until the wheels fall off. And that's one of the things that I had to build into my entrepreneurship journey, because as an entrepreneur, you have a whole lot of time. You have all the time in the world. You can wake up at 9 o'clock if you want to. You can start your day at 11. But if you start your day at 11, and you still need to get all of the day's work done, that means you have to work until 11 p.m. or however many hours that you work in your day. So if you have an 8-hour day in entrepreneurship and you start your day at 11, guess what? You're working until 7 p.m. that night. So an understanding of process and understanding of structures from corporate really helped me put these structures and, processes into my own entrepreneurship journey. So building out my own business at this point, despite the fact that I'm the only employee at my business, shout outs to the solopreneurs, I still wanted to have demarcated departments within my business. So an accounts department, a sales department, a C-suite, so that when Vive grows to the point where I have employees that come in to do all of these roles, I'm not starting from scratch. I'm not starting from zero. And also it helps me to take off one hat and put on the other to be able to do each of these parts of my business effectively, because then I can't be making the same rookie mistakes that I was seeing in my corporate journey where, for example, accounts was falling behind. No, if I could see that accounts was falling behind and the communication between the client and accounts was rough, then I have to take those things that they were doing and sort of build it into my business as the opposite. So if they were responding late, then I have to respond timeously. If their invoices were being automated and the automation was wonky, then I need to find out what software they were using or what sort of process they were using for the automation of their invoices, and make sure that I'm not doing what they're doing. So it's a lot of, these are the things that went wrong in the companies that I was working at, or these are the things that I had identified as issues. And so I'm going to be taking those and turning them into solutions within Vive.
I like that.
That's definitely from like the operations and the processes perspective. But in terms of the culture, it's remembering that, okay, it doesn't have to be quite so rigid in terms of culture. You don't need those harsh lines of demarcation between like upper management, middle management, and the guys at the bottom. It doesn't have to be like that. So those are some of the stuff that I was like, okay, cool. I'm very much determined to make sure that in Vive, as Vive grows and develops and takes on people, I don't want to have that feeling of, I am working for a company that doesn't know who I am, or I am working for a company that is only caring about its bottom lines. I'm not interested in essentially rebuilding my prison. No, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. So since you didn't have the option to transition into entrepreneurship from your 9 to 5, if you were given the option again, how would you prepare for that transition? What would you do to set yourself up properly into your journey of entrepreneurship? And I mean, in doing that, I guess you'd also just be giving some key considerations for anyone looking to transition into full-time entrepreneurship from their corporate job.
First and foremost, I would definitely have a bigger savings pocket. Thank goodness I did have a savings pocket at that time, just out of my own habit.
Financial planning,
just out of habit. I was like, it's not safe for me as a young Black professional to not have a savings pocket, because you never know. Just out of that, okay, cool, my fridge could die or my phone could die. But it turned out that it was like, oh no, you could suddenly get flung into full-time entrepreneurship all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say that, like, okay, cool, put away money. Everybody says put away money. It is important to put away money. I would also say that, like, if you are at some point, if you're doing your entrepreneurship thing part-time and you have the intention of going full-time at some point, I would say that build up a client roster, a very comfortable client roster. And it doesn't even have to be that big. It can be 3 people, but 3 people that you know that are going to be a constant source of income. And that source of income doesn't even have to be that huge. If, for example, your average is like 2,000 rands a client or 3,000 rands a client, then you know that you've got those 3 clients who you're going to keep going back to that are going to give you that 3,000 rands a month. And then you can use that in consideration to build your savings pocket. To say, okay, cool, considering the fact that I've got these 3 clients who are bringing in X amount of money in, then that means my savings pocket can be this much. I would also recommend, if it is possible, only if it is possible, moving back home. It's okay.
It's okay.
You can.
It's okay.
You should.
In Cyril's economy, it's okay.
It's okay. I promise you, it's okay. Moving home if you can. Not everybody is able to do this. If you can, move in with family, move in with relatives, to reduce the amount of money that you are paying on a month-to-month basis. Reduce it as far as possible. If you notice that, like, okay, cool, I'm using fiber, but I could just convert to LTE, change out to go to LTE. Unless, of course, your business requires you to have like a really steady internet connection, then please don't drop your fiber. But
yeah,
definitely look for areas of support in terms of like moving in with your family, moving in with friends, etc., etc. And then the last bit would be, wow, what would the last bit be? I'm trying to think now from my own experiences.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Don't listen to everyone about how your entrepreneurship journey should go when you are switching over.
Sure. Okay.
There's a lot of people with a lot of solid advice in terms of like what to do, but there are also a lot of people who, okay, I'm going to word this carefully because I want to make it clear. There are certain individuals who transitioned from full-time employment to full-time entrepreneurship 20 years ago. They have got useful gems because some bits of advice are timeless, but also take their advice contextually, because the environment was different when they were doing the switch to when you are doing the switch. Always consider your environment and consider your context when you are trying to do that switch. And if it doesn't look like it's the best time for you to do the switch, everybody hates this advice, don't do the switch. If the context is not yet so fully supportive of you doing the switch, then don't do the switch and put it back as far as you possibly can, because it's what, with the economy going the way that it's going right now, it's not going to be the easiest to go back if it goes a little bit left. So do take all the time that you need to make the decision of whether you want to switch out or not. And once you do switch out, don't be scared. Don't look back like, oh my God, what's that the best decision? Oh no, I'm so scared. Once you've taken the plunge, you have taken the plunge. Move forward as one who has already taken the plunge. It's natural to want to be like, oh my goodness, I'm so afraid. Things are going left for me. Everything is terrible. I don't know if this scene is from Futurama. I think it is. It's a clip where there's this robot whose internal systems needs like water inside of itself to be able to run. And then she notices that the water is no longer running. And she's like, oh no, I'll never make it this time. And then she runs to like a water source that's just behind her. And then she comes back and she's like, anyway, so there's a lot of that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to make it this time. Oh my gosh, my business is going to fall in on itself and I'm going to die and I'm not going to be able to pay my bills and I'm going to die. And then my laptop is going to freeze and I'm going to die. But that is a natural part of the journey. Feeling like you're going to die is a natural part.
I think it's a natural part of life, not
quite,
just
quite. Feeling like you're going to die. You're going to feel like you're going to die often. It's okay. Whoever your support person is in the moment that you're wanting to die, go to them and tell them like, listen, I feel like I'm going to die. And they're going to say, well, let's wait it out for the next 10 minutes and see if you really are going to die. If you are going to perish, then I'll put together all of everything that you require to be able to perish in peace. But most of the time, hopefully not, right? But definitely those would be the suggestions that I have of like, make sure that you have, those 3 clients that you have as like a constant source of an income. Make sure that your savings pocket is enough to sustain you, and
have a good support system.
Good support system,
Yeah,
right?
I like
And
that point.
stop looking back as much. Just once you've done it, it's done. That's what helps you to move forward. Like, okay, it's done. There's nothing more for me back there. Just move forward. So,
and in the spirit of looking forward, future plans for Viv?
well, I have plenty.
Yeah.
I am wanting to target, larger organizations. At this point, I've been doing, small to medium enterprises. Very nice, very sweet. I am wanting to the usual, grow up my client base, strengthen the offerings that we have, sort of kind of thing. But one of my dreams that I had for Viv, and one of the dreams that I had for the concept of value strategy and value innovation, was to have it be taught in business schools.
Love that. Love that. You're manifesting. Right. You're manifesting.
Ang face, ang manning face, So yeah. I'm really hoping that as I develop Viv and as I've developed the concept of value innovation and value strategy, that at some point people go, actually, that's super clear and super amazing. And firstly, it be taught in business schools, and secondly, I be invited to multiple places to speak about it. Right, because I love to talk. I love to speak.
And we love hearing you talk. We love hearing you talk, by the way.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. All right. In closing the episode, I usually have some bonus questions for my guests, just to wrap things up. So the first one is, what podcast, video, book, or article have you listened to or read that has shifted your perspective about work?
This is a good one, and I have it right here. Yes. The book that I read was Steering by Starlight by Martha Beck.
Okay.
That book, it wasn't so much, so the book itself doesn't really focus about the world of work. It focuses more on creating whatever sort of working environment, be it entrepreneurship, be it in the workplace or whatever place you're wanting to do. It's basically about creating the work life of your dreams. If I were to summarize it a little bit poorly, honestly, I am not doing justice to this book, because the concepts that she spoke about in this book are just so amazing. Because a lot of us really struggle with, okay, cool, I have this dream about either being an entrepreneur or climbing my way up the corporate ladder or starting this whole new way forward for myself in my career or in my life. And we have this mental block as it pertains to it, of like, okay, now how do I break through that mental block? Sometimes you break through it and then that mental block comes back, either in the form of, I can't do this, or there's no way I could possibly do this. I am an engineer. How could I possibly become an artist, a full-time artist? All of these sorts of like inside thoughts that get in the way of you doing the thing that you're really wanting to do with your life. And Steering by Starlight by Martha Beck broke those sort of mental blocks for me in a really significant way. It is amazing. I would recommend everyone and anyone read that book, regardless of whether you are, a person starting out their career, or someone in the middle of their career, or someone near the end of their career, realizing or recognizing of like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life now that I'm no longer fully employed? You have to read that book. It is just so Steering by Starlight by Martha Beck.
Love it. Love it. I will note that down as my next read. And what does wellness in the workplace / entrepreneurship look like for you?
Exactly that, actually. One big sigh. I noticed that I have a tendency towards, catastrophizing. This was a constant thing, even when I was an employee. It's a constant thing even now. mental wellness for me has been taking a step back and being like, okay, cool. What's your stress level looking like at this point in time, little missy? I know you've got a lot of deadlines or you've got a lot of things that you're worrying about right now, but what exactly is going on in your brain right now? So wellness for me has been like constant checks of like, are you okay? Are you all
Yeah.
right? What's
Yeah.
going on there, sister? Having
Yeah.
those sorts of conversations with myself to gauge where I am in terms of like, how much pressure have I been applying to myself? Have I been working effectively? As a result of working effectively, have I now like worked myself into the ground? It's been rethinking a lot of my approaches in terms of work. Or rather, I had a very strong tendency of just being work. Let's just go. It doesn't matter so long as if it's done. And switching over to entrepreneurship and realizing that now I am completely the master of my time, and realizing that actually, no, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to work myself into the ground. And what does that now look like? If I don't have to work myself into the ground for my business, what does that look like? Does that look like 8-hour work days where it's like we start at 9 o'clock, we end at 5 p.m. and we don't do anything after that time? Does it look like no more Saturday work? Does it look like not cracking open my emails until 10 o'clock that day? What does it look like? So entrepreneurship has opportunity to be able to say my time is my time and what I do with my time is mine, but I also have the responsibility to make sure that what I'm doing with my time honors both the work that I'm doing and me, the person who is doing.
Yes, love that.
Do
Honoring
not
yourself. I love that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what my journey has been looking like right now. Just having the freedom to do what I want to do in the way that I want to do it, but also having the responsibility to make sure that the work that I'm doing is active, but also not destroying me in the process. So
Love it.
yeah.
Love it. Love it. And any closing remarks about Vive, about entrepreneurship and just wellness as a whole?
Entrepreneurship has allowed me to do the stuff that I have not been able to do as a full-time employee, but at the same time, still do the stuff that I would be doing as a full-time employee. So
Love that. Yeah.
so it's been a sort of freeing experience, and once again stresses me to death sometimes, but I'm very glad, very happy to be here, and I'm very honored to be able to do this kind of work. And in terms of wellness and girl, without you I would have death for breakfast, lunch, and supper. So thank you, wellness, for keeping me alive. I appreciate the work that you do. And I think my relationship with the concept of wellness has changed as a result of like being unceremoniously flung into entrepreneurship, because it gave me the opportunity to redefine what that looks like. Girl, does
Yeah.
that look like waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning and being miserable, or waking up at 9 o'clock and feeling miserable? What flavor of wellness do we want today? Do we want to wake up and work in our bed? Do we want to wake up and work in the lounge, in the kitchen? Do we want to take care of ourselves today, or do we want to just leave ourselves and just vibe? So yeah, concept of what I will say, final sentence, is the concept of wellness is sort of very subjective, and so you have the opportunity to define what that looks like to you.
I love that.
So
love that. Thank you.
Enough words.
Thank you so much for your time, Sia. Where can we find Vive? Where can we find out more about Vive? For any potential clients that might be listening, who might be interested in your services, where can we find you?
So you can find Vive on, first of all, on Instagram. We are at Vive Consulting. Vive is spelled Vivre. So Victoria, India, Victoria, Romeo, Echo Consulting. On Instagram, we are on Twitter. We are Vive_consult on Twitter. Somebody had already snatched the Vive Consulting handle on Twitter. That's what they have to work with. We're also on Facebook as Vive Consulting. We also have a website, which is vive.co.za. And yeah, those are all the places.
And LinkedIn. And
And
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And LinkedIn. We are Vive Consulting on LinkedIn as well. You guys
Amazing.
can pop us an email at hello@vive.co.za, but the email address is on our website, is on all of our socials, and you can find us there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for just the sincerity of sharing your journey and just your experiences both in the corporate world and in the journey of entrepreneurship. Truly appreciated your insights. I look forward to seeing more of Vive, to seeing more of what you'll be doing over the next few years. Only great things wait for you. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, remember to follow Wellness in the Workplace at Wellness in the Workplace _ on Instagram. I will see you on the next episode. My name is Mbali Mziane. Bye-bye.